item B, deliberate and act on resolution 2016-1, public meeting policy. Mr. Barry?
Mayor Pro Tem and Commission, at this time of year, annually at the beginning of the year, we do consider a policy that dictates the terms of our meeting with the City Commission here, and that's generally the second and fourth Tuesday of every month at 6 o'clock here at the Commission chambers. And the policy goes on to detail, in accordance with the State Open Meetings Act, how we notify the public, issue an agenda for meetings, and not only the regular meeting, but special meetings as well. So this is a requirement of that Open Meeting Act. We do that every year, and there are revisions to this policy from previous policies in accordance with the state requirements.
Thank you. So this would be resolution number 2016-01, public meeting policy. Is there any questions or comments for Mr. Barry?
It seems to be in order.
I have one question. Item B, and decimated at least one newspaper, and if there's not one in Colfax County that's active, what happens in that case?
We post in 6 public places, and those places are actually listed on the agendas.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2016-1.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2016-01. Are there any other questions? All in favor, vote by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Item number C, deliberate and act on resolution 2016-2, November 2015 financial report. This is Antonucci.
Mayor Pro Tem and Commission, and also Mayor via conference call. In your packet this evening is the financial report for the month of November. We didn't have a second meeting in December, so I'll present the November financial report this evening, and then at your second meeting here in January, you'll receive the December, which will be our second quarter financial report. So let's see, if you go to the general fund financial summary, you will see that our general fund ending cash balance as of November 30th, 2015 was $914,555.49, less our required 1/12 reserve. And then we do have a little bit of funds still left that were designated for street improvement, GRT. And as we've completed several of the projects, you'll see we've used the funds for the Tiger Drive match, the Maxwell Edition chip seal. We also had a change order on Tiger Drive, and then the match for our Pecos co-ops. So we hope in the next couple months we will fully expend the balance of those designated street funds. And then that would leave an available cash of $484,687. Moving on to the gross receipts recap for the month of December, you will see in my notes that up until this December report, we were seeing an increase, which was in correlation with the fall paving projects. So you'll see that as of the month of December, we were kind of shocked, not kind of, but I was shocked when I saw that we had a decrease, which definitely was unexpected because we were still in the process of collecting the gross receipts on those fall projects. So when I looked into it a little bit further, you'll see that I made a note that we saw starting in September, there was a sharp decline in the distributions for our food and medical. And because of our population, we're under 10,000, we are held harmless. And so we're not aware of any new legislation or changes that did take effect that would affect us. Now, there has been some past legislation that would have taken effect, that is going to affect some of the larger communities, but we are to be held harmless. So as a result of that, the city manager and I have made contact with Tax and Revenue, and they are reviewing those distributions for accuracy. And the January report will not be available probably till Friday or Saturday, usually around the 15th of the month. We did have a verbal conversation after the holidays with one of the, I guess she would be like an analyst with Tax and Rev, that assured us that they are looking into this and it is being reviewed. So I know the city manager has had conversations also with Bill Fulgenetti and a couple other individuals, so they're definitely aware of it, and we feel that we probably have some money coming to us. So
What kind of percentage drop were we looking at?
well, with the December report, it was a 2.4% decrease per budget.
Yeah, but I mean,
Oh,
from
with,
what we normally would have received for our food net, roughly.
Mayor Pro Tem Commission, we're looking at a decline of, I would guess 85 or 90% decrease
Wow.
from what we have seen in previous years from food distribution and medical distribution.
so like for example, on our food distributions, we might get, especially in the summer months, it spikes, maybe $30,000 a month, and that distribution probably dropped to about less than 5,000. So,
I feel that it's a mistake.
and so you're talking September, October, November, now December,
Right.
that those reports have reflected that decline. So,
I think it's just a mistake on the part of the DFR that they've overlooked something, because it couldn't be that, because,
well, and if changes did go into effect July 1, that would be reflected in the September distribution, because we're always 2 months
Right.
behind.
yeah.
So we're hoping that it was just a system error and that maybe they check marked the wrong box. I know in talking to the analysts the other day, I mentioned we are below 10,000 in population, and she says, "Oh, you are." So I mean, she definitely made a note of that, and I did discuss with her that the county did implement the hold harmless tax increment. So we wanted to make sure that there wasn't any new increments, even at the county level, that could have been, misinterpreted to be a city hold harmless tax, because we did not implement that. So I feel confident that we can get it straightened out. She said that if corrections are made, they should be seen in the distribution that we received this week.
Cool.
So it's a little difficult during the holidays
Sure.
to get a hold of people at the state level. In addition, in the month of December, we did receive a partial payment on property taxes. It was about $100,000, so we'll be receiving the larger portion of that here in January. Our Financial Advisory Committee did meet in the month of December, and at our meeting, which we'll be having next week, we are going to do a semi-annual review of the balance in your gross receipts tax, the half-cent dedicated for the recreation center. And so we're going to be analyzing that and coming to you with a recommendation later this month as we look at an accelerated debt payment on the debt of that facility. So we're going to be doing that. And just as a reminder, we had talked about this before. We have to give 45-day notice to New Mexico Finance Authority before we do that. So the next payment will be due May 1st. So that should give us enough time to do a thorough review of that and make a recommendation on how much we have in the reserve to make that additional payment. That would also require a budget adjustment. So we would do a budget adjustment to whatever amount is approved. And then the only other thing in your packet is the financial statement for the month of November 30th. And that reflects all of our funds, and everything is in balance. And on the second page is your general fund breakdown, and you'll see that all of our departments as of November 30th were operating within budget. Executive, we're a little high, but that's to be expected. We have made several progress payments to our audit firm, and I also need to reclassify some of our juvenile justice coordinator's salary once we get the reimbursements from CYFD. So that would drop that percentage. But other than that, every other department is within budget.
Kudos to you and the staff, because I know for a fact that you guys have limited some, don't spend unnecessarily, and it shows in our financial report. So I think that what you're doing in that case is a plus for the city.
Well, I think all of our departments have been operating very conservatively, and that's just historically been our approach, at least until we get the balance of funds on property tax. And then hopefully we can resolve this issue with tax and rev, because that as well affects our budget.
And I would just add, I think one area of concern is on equipment and solid waste and public works. I think we're probably a little higher than budget on expenses on repairs of equipment, and we're running older equipment, and we've seen issues with our garbage trucks. We particularly had one that has really given us some trouble this year, and we run backup, but we're kind of running ahead on expenses. When we get these snow events, snow plows and all that, we've seen repairs necessary on that, and it just comes with running the older equipment, and something we've talked about before. We don't really have a good plan for replacement of this equipment, so we just fix it and we go on, and we're seeing some impacts, some costs from running older equipment this year. So I just bring that forward. It's something that we don't really see coming or control. It's just as we need a piece of equipment and it needs repaired, we repair it. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Antonucci at this time?
I'll move to accept the financial report, resolution 2016-2.
We have a motion to approve the resolution 2016-2, the approval of the November 30th financial report.
I'll second.
And a second. Trish, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Schuster,
Yes.
Commissioner Giacomo,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sagata,
Yes.
Mayor Metz.
Thank you. Item D, deliberate and act on resolution 2016-3, approval of the 2016 edition of the, is this supposed to be international or is it internal fire code?
It's international.
Okay, international fire code. Mr. Barry.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor, Commission, we do have Chief Matthews on hand to give you a rundown of the action that we're anticipated here. I would comment that we're actually looking at adoption of the standards of the 2015 edition of the International Fire Code, and I'll let the Chief talk to you about that, but it's the 2015, if you could make a note on your copy of the resolution. That's the action that we're adopting tonight.
Thank you. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners. Periodically, the codes which govern our actions and building and electrical and fire are updated. Currently, we are under the 2009 edition of the International Fire Code. What we'd like to do is adopt the most recent, which is the 2015 edition. That will keep us up to date. Some of the changes have been on occupancy load, safe rooms, fallout shelters and homes and stuff, acceptable distances to exits, to extinguishers, things like that. It will also keep us in compliance with what the state is. New Mexico has just, within the last few months, adopted the 2015 edition. By adopting 2015, it was additionally give us a few more points on that ISO audit coming up, which of course won't hurt. And those are the main reasons why we would like to stay up to date and not fall behind and adopt the 2015 edition.
Are there any questions for Chief Matthews?
No, I'll move that we approve resolution 2016-03 and adopt the 2015 edition of International Court.
Do we have a motion to approve Resolution 2016-03? Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, vote by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Item E, deliberate and act on Resolution 2016-4, the National Guard building acquisition. Mr. Berry.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and Commission, we just to update you on the status of National Guard building that's located at the airport. It's referred to as the Readiness Center. We were informed by New Mexico National Guard that they would vacate the building, and they have consolidated that operation with the Springer Readiness Center, and there is not a National Guard presence in the building currently. So in our conversation with officials of the National Guard, they did state that they would entertain a request for the building to be donated to the city of Raton. And I would cover a little history of the National Guard building. About 1986, there was a new building considered. The city of Raton participated in that by providing a location at the Raton Airport. The building is located on land owned by the city of Raton. At that time, there was a lease agreement for a term of 53 years, in which the National Guard would pay $1 a year to the city of Raton and construct the facility on our property for the purpose of operating a National Guard armory. So they're not operating a National Guard armory currently. They will entertain donating the building to the city of Raton. I have asked to be on the agenda of the State Armory Board meeting. That will be January 26th in Santa Fe, and they did ask for the request that the commission consider this resolution, and if you pass the resolution, we will then send that on to the State Armory Board as part of the request for the building to come to the city of Raton. In turn, we would try to use the building for economic development purposes.
Any questions for Mr. Berry?
I'd like to make a motion that the city adopt resolution 2016-4, the National Guard building acquisition.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Trish, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Commissioner Giacomo?
Yes.
Commissioner Schuster?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Segada?
Yes.
Mayor Metz?
Yes.
Thank you. Item F, deliberate and act on Resolution 2016-5, the LEDA Security Agreement for Schuler Theater Digital Film Project. Mr. Berry.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and Commission, you will remember that for a while now we have been talking about application for funding through the State Local Economic Development Act, which provides funding typically for economic development projects. We did submit an application which was $100,000 to construct a digital film facility within the Schuler Theater, allow us to use the theater for digital film. That in turn helps the downtown area by having 2 screens for films, the El Raton and the Schuler Theater. We talked about under our management agreement with the Schuler Restoration Board and their subcontract with the El Raton, having a management group that would not only use the theater for live performances but for film as well. So where we're at on the application, there are a couple of things that have come back to us that we need to provide to State Economic Development Department, and one of those is a security agreement. So we've had discussions on what a security agreement would look like for this lead of funding, and we do have with us tonight Mr. Wade Jackson. He is General Counsel for New Mexico Economic Development Department. And I have had several conversations with Mr. Jackson about a security agreement. And if we could, I would like to call on Mr. Jackson to address the commission and answer any questions that you have. But Mr. Jackson, I don't know if I've adequately prepped the conversation regarding the security agreement. There are other things that they are asking for along the lines of financial statements and my driver's license. So those are things that we'll get to economic development and try to move the project forward. But Mr. Jackson is hopefully I've prepped you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. Berry, Mayor Pro Tem, Commission members. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be here. I won't get too far into the details about how either the statute or the theater projects work, but just some shallow level background. The Historic Theaters Initiative started just a few years ago. Secretary Barella was actually in this neck of the woods in Clayton and visited the theater there and learned firsthand about the sort of draw that Mr. Berry described, the sort of magnet that it was for the downtown, and the opposite effect when folks had to go 70 or 80 miles to see a movie. They're not staying to have dinner or ice cream afterward or do some shopping on Main Street. And so he began this Historic Theaters Initiative. This would be our 8th or 9th theater, I believe. We've done around 7 or 8 privately owned theaters. This would be our second publicly owned theater statewide. As Mr. Berry mentioned, those projects are funded through LEDA, the Local Economic Development Act, which is essentially an exception to the anti-donation clause. As you know, state or local governments are prohibited from giving something away, making a donation essentially. And this is an exception to that, where job opportunities are going to be created through either state or local government funding for land, building, or infrastructure. The state or local governments can donate a building, land, or purchase them for a private entity, which is the way the statute's designed. It's designed for a private entity that's going to come in and create jobs. It's really not designed for a publicly owned project, but it is allowed for cultural facilities, things like this, that are generally publicly owned, theaters, museums, and things like that. Because of the nature of the facility, as I described earlier, we recognize it's not going to have the direct job creation impact that a private sector employer might, but it's going to have a larger spin-off effect for your Main Street district, your downtown, the other retailers in the area. And that's the reason the department and Secretary Barella have gotten so strongly behind this. The only details that we're still banging around are, as I said, there is a job creation requirement, even though it's a publicly owned facility. Those funds have to go to an entity that's going to create jobs, and then there has to be security. Essentially, the statute requires that if the jobs promised in exchange for that funding are not created, they'll be paid back. There'll be some sort of clawback, and if the entity is unable to make a direct payment, there'll be some sort of security. This is easy for that private sector business. If we build a building for a business and they don't create the jobs they promised, we have a mortgage on that building and we take it back over and we move on to the next project. Things are different. I won't say more difficult. They're different for a publicly owned facility because you're not going to give us a mortgage on your building and we don't want one. But there are other options that a private sector entity might not have. I guess the bottom line is the statute requires security. We recognize that it's not going to be, I think in our draft here we have one job or 2 jobs over an 18-month period, trying to be realistic and recognize the spin-off effect that that's going to have. And so what we're trying to do at this point is identify a fund or a revenue stream or something of equal value that the city can put up as security solely for that 12 or 18-month period in which those jobs are to be created. The jobs created, you go about showing your movies and creating your jobs, and we get out of your hair.
Cool. Any questions for Mr. Jackson? Yeah.
Now, let me add that Mr. Jackson, it's kind of my shortcoming. We had planned on having a security agreement for you tonight, and I have not really got all the information to Mr. Jackson, and we have a draft of the agreement. So let's plan on going to the January 26th meeting to approve that. But generally, I think what we're talking about is the purchase of equipment is the larger part of the project, and we had estimated about $70,000 for purchase of equipment. So we would put that in the security agreement as security, the value of the equipment. And in addition, revenues from the theater would accrue in a fund, which would be a security pledged to this agreement as well. So those are really the two things that we're talking about. I am going to offer that we throw in a 1984 Sterling garbage truck in the community center, but I don't know if he's going to take me up on that. But and I hope that's accurate with what we're talking about in the content of an agreement. But we have not completed that yet. We would anticipate that at the next meeting.
It is, and we've done, as I said, we've done one or two of these publicly owned theaters. We've done several other theaters. We've done numerous other LEDA projects. So we have a lot of forms and a lot of examples. So it's really just a matter of finding the right, identifying what that security is going to be, finding the right language, plugging it into an agreement that we've used on other projects, and going on from there. So I think really it's just a matter of filling in the blanks. I think we're very close. And if I may, before I conclude, I'll just add, I was here, I believe it was September, for the Legislative Economic and Rural Development Committee hearing, which was at the Schuler Theater, and I was blown away. It's a gorgeous facility, and
Thank you.
I'm happy to participate in this project and keep it operating.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank Mr. Jackson who drove up tonight for the meeting to address you. Thank you very much for coming. If we were a little more efficient, we might wrap this up tonight, but we will have the agreement finalized for you at the next meeting and try to move the project along as quickly as we can. So we look forward to that.
Appreciate
You answered my question that I was going to have, which was exactly what is the security agreement. So you covered that well. So we appreciate you coming up and directing it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
So the action here would be to postpone the security agreement.
We will entertain a motion then to postpone till the January 26th meeting.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. A second. All in favor to postpone action on the resolution 2016-5 until January 26th meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item G, deliberate and act on resolution 2016-6, an agreement between the City of Raton and the New Mexico Finance Authority to extend time to spend proceeds related to the solid waste loan agreement dated May 31st, 2013. Mr. Barry.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and Commission, you will recall that a few years ago, the city did work on a loan through New Mexico Finance Authority for the purpose of improving our solid waste system. Now, what was anticipated back in 2013, that has evolved pretty significantly. So you'll also recall that in that time, the City of Raton has prepared an audit of our solid waste system, have taken those recommendations of that audit, done planning and due diligence on moving those recommendations forward. And so because things have changed for the expenditure of those funds, we have been in contact with the New Mexico Finance Authority and taken various actions to revise the use of the funds. And generally, the funds are are allocated towards construction of a transfer station / recycle center, and then equipment, especially new containers. And you'll also recall that we've had a challenge in coming up with a commercially available bear-proof dumpster that we can use with our side loading equipment. There really is not such a dumpster out there on the market. The bear-proof dumpsters that you typically see do not, are not picked up by automatic equipment like our side loading truck. They require that somebody get out and unlatch the dumpster, and typically what you see in a national park, and you might have a bag in there, but it's all manual. So with our system, more than 1,000 dumpsters, that's not really possible. So we've also taken some time to, and essentially with a local company here, engineered a bear-proof dumpster, and we think we're ready to go on that. And so funds would go to that. They would actually be matching funds, matched by New Mexico Game and Fish, because they have grant funds for such a thing. So we look at wholesale replacement of most of the dumpsters in town with this money. We think we're ready to proceed into an order for approximately 700 new dumpsters that would be bear-proof. Game and Fish, we've had communications with them. They're ready to go with their end of that. And then in addition, the transfer station recycle center. So we're looking for some matching funds on that. We've had, you know, we got turned down at last year's legislature, and of course we're asking again at this year's legislature, but both of these things I think would happen during 2016. At any rate, we ran out of time on the loan agreement, so what you have in front of you now is an extension of time to give us an adequate enough time to apply the loan proceeds to that usage.
Any questions for Mr. Berry?
Well, Mr. Berry, I think kudos should be extended to Mr. Phillips, solid waste manager. I've observed the new bear-proof that they've designed, and it is exactly what the Game and Fish told us, that if we could show them that, they would give us our matching funds, which they've acted on. So I think that it's a good deal.
Any other questions?
And if the garbage truck we have right now, the side loading, completely kaputs, do we just purchase a similar model? Would that be the plan? Or?
Yes. That we would really be dedicated to a side loading collection truck, and so if we go down the road of replacing one, we would buy a similar model.
I think I read the extension we're proposing is to September of 2017.
That's correct.
Can some of the dumpsters we have now be modified or rebuilt to fit this new unit? Or?
They're very similar. They are manufactured by a different. The basic box is manufactured by CCA. That's a prison corporation in Colorado that has a contract with Game and Fish. So New Mexico Game and Fish would submit their purchase order to CCA for the containers. When we get them here, we'll retrofit the lids. Now they come with what you would expect to see in the national park, a latch that the user opens up and you throw your stuff back in, and hopefully you close the lid. So it's got the latch that you typically would see with a bear-proof dumpster, but what we've added is a mechanism that when the truck engages the container, it will spring the larger lid, and the whole lid will rotate like our containers do now. We have plastic lids, we have some steel lids. This is a pretty durable, robust steel lid. So it comes with the bear-proof access.
Is it going to be easy to operate for some of our seniors? That was one of the concerns we had this morning in talking with some folks, that the current ones that we now have are kind of clumsy to open and are heavy. So
It is a concern that some people will have a challenge in operating this thing. So what our plan is to order about 100 2-cubic-yard containers that will be much shorter than our present 3-cubic-yard containers, and where we can identify people that have an issue with the container, and I think the height is part of that. You'll have one that's much lower. Now you still have to operate that mechanism, but hopefully that will resolve problems for most people, but it is a concern that people will be able to operate it.
I think we've kind of addressed that. We'll see how it goes.
It's pretty impressive, it really is. And I didn't find it was that hard as the weakest one on the commission. Couldn't figure that it was to open.
Even the shortest one, I kind of agree with the height.
Any other comments for Mr. Berry? I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2016 on agreement between the City of Raton and New Mexico Finance Authority to extend time to spend proceeds related to the solid waste loan agreement dated May 31st, 2013.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second for that mouthful. Trish, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Schuster,
Yes.
Commissioner Giacomo,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Segata,
Yes,
Mayor Metz.
thank you. Item under business is the city manager's report. Mr. Berry.
Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and Commission, I will start with the legislative session. The New Mexico Legislature will begin a 30-day session on January 19th. You remember last year was a 60-day session, and being the odd year, we'll have a 30-day session, so not a lot of time to conduct business. Of course, a lot of what funds state of New Mexico is severance tax, and with oil as low as it is, there are already signals out there that there's not going to be a lot of funding available, but we did submit capital outlay requests as were considered by the commission. I believe it was at the end of November, and those are to fund street improvements, drainage improvements, filter plant improvements, and our solid waste transfer station funding. So those are submitted. I would tell you that I did meet with Senator Pete Campos today. Also, Commissioner Chavez was present, and we did discuss those capital outlay issues, plus other things that may come up at the legislature. I will plan on meeting with our representative, Dennis Roche, on Monday, the 18th, and again go over the requests and any legislation that might be of concern to Raton. The New Mexico Municipal League sponsors annual municipal day. That's scheduled for January 29th in Santa Fe at the La Fonda Hotel. And if you remember from last year, they have a legislative report that is very useful to us. And during the legislature, Municipal League is continuously funneling information to the members about what bills are submitted, and they do an analysis of those bills on our behalf and represent us as far as legislation that might be beneficial to the cities. So Municipal Day is a good function that we get a lot of information. 29th La Fonda Hotel, as we talked about. Colfax County has scheduled a legislative reception. That's at the El Dorado Hotel on February 1st. The hours of 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And there, a lot of the legislators come by. They touch base with Colfax County officials. I would expect that all Colfax County municipalities, as well as the county, will be present at that reception. What we've seen over the last couple of years is attendance at that reception has really grown. It was really good last year. It gives us a chance to talk to people in state government and in the legislature, as well as the administration. So that's what I have on the legislative session. I attended the UNM Paving and Transportation Conference in Albuquerque on January 4th and 5th. And just something interesting there, I'll try not to go into too much engineering detail here, but and that's the paving conference, is a bunch of engineers, but we did hear a presentation from somebody who was the Secretary of Transportation in Washington State, and they talked about funding of roadways and bridges through the gas tax. And so last year at the legislature, there was a bill in to raise the gas tax. And I think the gas tax in New Mexico is 17 cents on a gallon of fuel, and the city gets a couple of cents out of that, in which we fund our street improvement programs. But the interesting thing is that that model for a gas tax may be something that really applied 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and that seems to be evolving now. And back then, it was a true road user fee. If you were using the road, you pulled in and bought fuel and you paid the tax. However, with electric cars and hybrid cars and highly efficient cars, there are people driving on the road, using the roads, using the bridges, that essentially are not paying the tax at all, or they're not paying their share of the tax. So they talked about, well, in Washington State, for example, to just keep up with where they're at, the gas tax is 45 cents in Washington State, but there's some disparity because certain people are not paying that, and as you get more electric cars on the road, there's going to have to be a new model. So they talked about different type of user fees, which New Mexico is pretty late to the party, but I think states that see more electric car usage, Washington, Oregon, California, for example, they're going to lead the way on really changing this gas tax model. So that while we're talking about gas taxes in New Mexico, that's probably evolving as we go along, and it's probably some years off. Right now, we still would like to see a little more gas tax come our way to help fix our streets. But just something interesting from the conference, that funding is just not meeting the needs for states like New Mexico or cities like Raton. We're all falling behind on fixing roads. The other emphasis of the paving conference was less discussion of building new roads with new materials and more of recycling the materials that we have. So they talked about repaving roads without putting any new material in there other than some liquid asphalt. But they have processes where, as we've seen here before, we mill up the old asphalt, we add liquid asphalt to that, and materials that are evolving, or high float emulsions or foamed asphalts, to rejuvenate that, and you lay that same asphalt back down. You're using the same aggregates and saving money over putting down new mixes. So these piles of millings that are around, and they're valuable, and recycling is one way that states are meeting the inflated cost of constructing roads. Chip seal, as somebody said, that's the king of pavement maintenance and extending the life of your pavement. And you remember that last year we did a big project that covered most of the Maxwell South addition. That's what everybody else is doing. They're doing more chip sealing, they're doing seal coats, micro seals, and they're generally recycling the asphalt you have there. Less of a brand new hot mix. So I think we're kind of on point with what everybody is doing there to try to stretch the dollars a little more. Anyway, I told you I will attend the State Armory Board meeting in Santa Fe on January 26th. There is a meeting scheduled in the Commission Chambers January 14th. That's a Thursday, 6:30 p.m. That is a citizen-led effort for Neighborhood Watch, and we've had since our meeting regarding Crime Stoppers a lot of interest in various Neighborhood Watch programs. So on January 14th, we're going to try to pull that all together and really get an effective program in which, City of Raton, especially our police department, will really cooperate with these citizen groups. And Crime Stoppers, I think, has had a large response as far as really becoming effective in our town. There's construction going on the seniors center now, and on that addition on the south side of the building, we'll be removing some of the glass roof that really, I understand, leaks like sieve.
Yeah.
And building a conventional roof, and repairing floors and fixing walls on that. So that work is underway. Multimodal project is really on hold, and I think it really will be a wintertime shutdown. There was some construction done, some foundations poured for bus shelters, but between snow and low temperatures, there's just not much that can be done out there. So nothing has happened in December, and nothing's happened so far in January on that. And I think we really will not see any action on that until probably March 1st. On Roundhouse Road, we do have the city crew doing a project. We're going to keep Roundhouse Road, that portion of it between Memorial Lane and Grant Avenue, closed for the rest of this week and possibly into next week. And we're doing just what we talked about. We're making road improvements with the Public Works crew using millings that we have acquired from milling project previously. So that's going on throughout the week. Convention Center kitchen project. We had a meeting there last week with the group that's interested in really getting a community kitchen up and going, and I might call on Commissioner Schuster to talk a little more about that. But since that time, we did put some part of our crew down at the kitchen. We're removing some cabinets. We're going to make some floor improvements. We're painting. We're fixing some things on the walls, and getting started on the project. There are a number of steps that we have to take. In meeting with Senator Campos today, he did ask me to pass this information along. There will be a casting call in Las Vegas on Saturday, January 16th, and I immediately thought of Commissioner Chavez, but this is a casting call for the television series Longmire. So if we have any aspiring actors in Raton, at the Luna Community College cafeteria between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Saturday, January 16th, they will be looking for background actors for the Longmire series. That's all I have, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Any other comments from the commission?
Well, I don't have much more to add about the kitchen, but we are, working with the existing budget for the convention center. It's not tapping into any other budget, to my understanding, correct? And
Great.
we have a group of dedicated, a small group of dedicated women working on this project, and I think in a couple of months we'll be seeing some progress on having a process outlined on how people can utilize the kitchen and get some Raton good food out there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mr. Giacomo, any comments? Mr. Chavez?
Yes.
Mayor Mance, any comments?
No.
Okay, having concluded the business part of our meeting, I now adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Thank you.